The sign welcoming visitors to Oakhaven claimed it was a place to call home, but as Chloe Paxton's 2008 Honda Civic sputtered and wheezed past the faded wooden billboard, she felt less like she was coming home and more like she was retreating to a bunker. The air conditioning had surrendered 3 hours ago, somewhere just outside the city limits where her life had imploded. Now, sweat trickled down her back, gluing her shirt to the driver's seat. She glanced in the rearview mirror. Her shoulder-length brown hair, usually manageable, had rebelled against the humidity and was currently doing a fantastic impression of a distressed tumbleweed. Her brown eyes looked tired, framed by dark circles that no amount of concealer could hide. "Just keep moving, Betsy," Chloe pleaded, patting the dashboard. "Don't you dare die on me now. We are 5 miles from my parents' driveway. If you die, I have to walk, and if I walk, I will melt, and then my mother will try to store me in a Tupperware container." The car, clearly unimpressed by her threats, let out a sound that sounded suspiciously like a death rattle. Clunk hiss pop, steam billowed from under the hood, obscuring her view of the winding country road. "Oh, for the love of Pete," Chloe groaned. She steered the dying vehicle onto the gravel shoulder, the tires crunching loudly as the engine gave one final, shuddering heave and fell silent. Silence descended, heavy and absolute, broken only by the ticking of the cooling metal and the chirping of crickets in the tall grass. Chloe rested her forehead against the steering wheel. This was it. The universe wasn't just kicking her while she was down. It was putting on steel-toed boots and doing a river dance. She had left Oakhaven 12 years ago with a scholarship, a shiny engagement ring from a man who promised her the world, and a certainty that she was destined for bigger things. She was returning with a finalized divorce decree, 3 suitcases of clothes, 0 self-esteem, and a car that had just committed mechanical suicide. She pushed the door open and stepped out. At 5'3", she wasn't exactly imposing, but she tried to muster a stance of authority as she glared at the hood. She popped the latch, burned her fingers, hissed a curse word that would have made her grandmother faint, and propped the hood open. She stared at the engine. It was a mass of wires, tubes, and hot metal. She had absolutely no idea what she was looking for. "Okay," she muttered to herself, her voice shaking slightly. "Maybe it just needs a pep talk. Look here, engine. You are a strong, independent combustion machine. You don't need coolant. Coolant is a social construct." A low rumble approached from the north. It wasn't the frantic whine of a commuter car. It was the deep, throaty growl of a heavy-duty engine. A truck. Chloe stiffened. She didn't want to be seen like this. Not yet. She wanted to roll into town, looking like a woman who was taking a sabbatical. Not a refugee fleeing a war zone. She tried to smooth her hair down, but her hands were covered in road grime. A dark blue, older model pickup truck slowed as it approached, the gravel popping under its massive tires. It pulled up behind her Civic, blocking her in. The engine cut and the driver's door opened. A pair of worn work boots hit the ground first, then long legs clad in faded denim, then a torso in a gray t-shirt that seemed to fit a little too snugly across the shoulders. The man who stepped out was tall, very tall. He adjusted the brim of his baseball cap, shadowing his face. But Chloe didn't need to see his eyes to know who it was. The lanky frame that had filled out with deceptive, corded muscle over the years was unmistakable. Tucker Donovan. Of all the people in Oakhaven, of all the gin joints in all the towns. He walked toward her with a slow, measured gait, his hands tucked into his pockets. He looked exactly the same as he had in high school, only more solid, more grounded. The sandy brown hair sticking out from under his cap was a little longer, curling slightly at the nape of his neck. He stopped a few feet away, his hazel eyes scanning the smoking engine before shifting to her. He didn't smile. He just looked at her with that quiet, observant intensity that used to make her squirm in 10th grade biology. "Chloe?" he said. His voice was deep, scratching at something in her memory. It wasn't a question, it was a statement of fact. "Tucker," she replied, forcing a bright, brittle smile. "Fancy meeting you here. I was just deciding to have a roadside barbecue." The car volunteered to be the grill. He didn't laugh. He didn't even crack a smile. He just looked at the steam rising from the radiator. "You blew a hose." "Did I? Well, that sounds festive." She crossed her arms, trying to hide the tremor in her hands. "I thought maybe it was just acting out for attention. It's a very dramatic vehicle. Must get it from its mother." Tucker stepped past her, invading her personal space with a casual indifference that made her breath hitch. He leaned over the engine, his height making him tower over the small car. He reached in, avoiding the searing hot metal with practiced ease, and gave a tug on a rubber tube. "Split right down the middle," he said, straightening up. He wiped his hands on a rag he pulled from his back pocket. "You can't drive this!" "Watch me," Chloe said, defensiveness flaring up like a match strike. "I just need to let it cool down, maybe whisper some affirmations to it, and I'll be on my way." Tucker looked at her then, really looked at her. His gaze felt heavy, like he was weighing her soul and finding it wanting. "You drive this, you'll crack the block. Then you're out an engine, not just a hose." "Well, I appreciate the diagnosis, Dr. Donovan," she said, her tone sharper than she intended. She was exhausted, she was scared, and standing next to Tucker, who looked like he had life completely figured out, made her feel small and chaotic. "But I have AAA. Somewhere, I think. If my card hasn't expired." "Cell service is dead out here," Tucker said flatly, "has been for years. You know that." Chloe checked her phone. "No bars, of course." "Right, well, I'll wait. Someone else will come by." "I'm here." "Yes, you are, painfully so." She let out a short, nervous laugh. "Look, Tucker, I don't want to trouble you. We weren't exactly braiding each other's hair in high school. You don't have to play the knight in shining armor." Tucker's jaw tightened slightly. He looked annoyed, which was the standard reaction she used to get from him back in the day. He was the golden boy, the rancher's son, the popular athlete who never made a fuss. She was the drama club kid, the one who talked too much when it was quiet. They were oil and water. "Get in the truck, Chloe," he said, turning back toward his vehicle. "Excuse me?" "I'm not leaving you on the side of the road in 90-degree heat with a dead car," he said, opening the passenger door of his pickup. "I'll tow it to Miller's. He can fix it tomorrow." "I can't." "You can," he interrupted, his voice firm, "unless you want to walk 5 miles in those sandals." Chloe looked down at her strappy sandals, which were cute but entirely impractical for hiking. She looked back at Tucker, who was waiting with the patience of a saint, or perhaps a stone. "Fine," she sighed, defeated, "but for the record, this counts as kidnapping." "It's a rescue," he corrected. "Don't make it weird." She grabbed her purse and trudged over to the truck. The cab was high up. She had to grab the handle and hoist herself in. Inside, it smelled of fresh air, diesel, and something uniquely clean, like rain on hot asphalt. There were no dangling air fresheners, no clutter. It was neat, orderly, and reliable. Everything she wasn't. Tucker hooked up her car with efficient, silent movements. He moved with a strength that seemed effortless, hauling the heavy chain as if it were a piece of string. Chloe watched him through the side mirror, feeling a strange pang in her chest. He was so competent. He climbed into the driver's seat, the cab shrinking instantly with his presence. He put the truck in gear and pulled out slowly, checking the tension on the tow chain. "So," Chloe said, the silence stretching too thin for her comfort. "How's the ranching biz? Cows still mooing? Grass still growing?" "It's fine," Tucker said, eyes on the road. Good conversation. We're really getting to the heart of things." She fiddled with the strap of her purse. "I heard you took over the whole operation." "Yep, that's a lot of responsibility." "Do you ever just want to, I don't know, run away and join the circus? Become a trapeze artist?" Tucker glanced at her, a flicker of confusion in his hazel eyes. "Why would I do that?" "Metaphorically, Tucker." "God, you're literal." She slumped back in the seat. "Never mind." They drove in silence for another mile. The familiarity of the landscape began to ache in her chest. The rolling hills, the ancient oak trees, the fences that needed painting. It was all the same. She was the only thing that had changed, warped by 5 years of a marriage that had started as a fairy tale and ended as a horror story. She subconsciously rubbed her left ring finger. The tan line was still there, faint but visible. Tucker noticed. She saw his eyes dart to her hand and then back to the road. "You back for a visit?" he asked. His voice was softer this time, less abrupt. "Something like that," Chloe lied. She wasn't ready to say the words "I'm divorced and homeless" out loud yet. Taking a breather. Life in the city is loud. Loud isn't always bad, Tucker mused. Quiet can be loud too. Chloe looked at him, surprised by the depth of the comment. "What does that mean?" "Nothing." He shifted gears. "We're almost to Miller's. I'll drop the car, then take you to your folks' place." You know where they live? Everyone knows where everyone lives, Chloe. It's Oakhaven. He pulled into the gravel lot of Miller's auto body. He unhooked her car with the same efficient speed, spoke briefly to Old Man Miller, who looked at Chloe with wide, curious eyes, and then climbed back into the truck. Ready? He asked. As I'll ever be, she muttered. The drive to her parents' house was short. When they pulled into the driveway, her mother was already on the porch, looking like she had radar for failing daughters. Tucker put the truck in park, but didn't unlock the doors immediately. He turned in his seat to face her. The bill of his cap cast a shadow over his eyes, but she saw the corner of his mouth twitch. "Welcome home, Chloe," he said. And then, for a brief second, he flashed that smile, the one she remembered from the yearbook. The one that made his whole face change from stoic statue to something warm and dangerously charming. It hit her right in the solar plexus. Then, just as quickly, the smile was gone, replaced by his usual impassive mask. "Thanks, Tucker," she managed to squeak out. "I owe you one." "Yeah," he said, unlocking the doors. "You do." Chloe scrambled out of the truck, grabbed her bag, and didn't look back until she was safely on the porch. When she turned, the blue truck was already backing out, kicking up dust as it disappeared down the road. "Well," her mother said, opening the screen door, her eyes scanning Chloe from head to toe. "You look terrible. And was that Tucker Donovan?" "Hi, Mom," Chloe said, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack her face. "Yes, it was. And yes, I do." She stepped into the house that smelled of lemon polish and childhood, leaving the image of the stoic rancher and his blue truck lingering in her mind longer than she cared to admit. Waking up in her childhood bedroom felt disturbingly like time travel, and not the cool sci-fi kind. It was the kind where you woke up staring at a poster of a boy band from 1999 and realized your feet were sticking out the end of the twin bed because you were a grown woman with back pain and a pending divorce. Chloe rolled out of bed, dodging the judgmental stare of a stuffed bear on the dresser, and raided her mother's closet for something that didn't smell like yesterday's breakdown. She settled on an oversized floral blouse that made her look like a vaguely fashionable upholsterer, and a pair of her old jeans she found in a drawer. They were tight, distressingly tight. "It's water weight," she whispered to herself, or stress weight, or just cheese. Her mission for the day was simple: assess the damage to the Honda, acquire caffeine, and avoid seeing anyone she had gone to high school with until she had lost 10 pounds and gained a personality that wasn't. Sad divorcee. She borrowed her father's bicycle, a rusty contraption that squeaked with every revolution of the pedals, and wobbled her way into town. The humidity was already rising, frizzing her hair into a halo of static. By the time she rolled into the lot of Miller's auto body, she was panting and sweating in places a lady shouldn't mention. Mr. Miller was wiping his hands on a rag, looking at her Civic like it was a sick puppy that needed to be put down. "Well," Mr. Miller said, hiking up his trousers. "It ain't just the hose, Chloe. Radiator's cracked. Water pump is shot. And honestly, your timing belt is living on a prayer." Chloe gripped the handlebars of the bike. "Give it to me straight, Mr. Miller. How much?" He named a figure. Chloe's soul left her body. "Okay, right. That's a number. A large number. I can have the parts by Tuesday," he offered sympathetically. "Tuesday? Great, perfect. I love Tuesdays." She forced a smile. "I'll let you know." She retreated from the garage before she could cry in front of the lug nuts. She needed coffee. Strong, black, and preferably spiked with a sedative. She parked the squeaky bike in front of the Daily Grind, the only coffee shop in Oakhaven that didn't serve Folgers out of a styrofoam cup. It was a new addition since she'd left, trying hard to be hip with exposed brick and a chalkboard menu written in aggressive calligraphy. She pushed the door open, the bell jingling cheerfully. The blast of air conditioning was a religious experience. She closed her eyes for a second to savor it. "Careful, you're blocking the traffic flow." Chloe's eyes snapped open. Sitting at a high-top table right next to the door, nursing a black mug, was Tucker Donovan. Of course. He was wearing a different baseball cap today, this one navy blue, and a plaid button-down with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms that looked like they could wrestle a steer or build a house. He was reading a newspaper. An actual, physical newspaper. "Tucker," Chloe said, her voice jumping an octave, "we have to stop meeting like this. People will talk." He lowered the paper and looked at her. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes crinkled slightly at the corners. "Morning, Chloe. How's the car?" "Terminal," she said. leaning against the doorframe and trying to look casual despite the fact that she was currently vibrating with caffeine withdrawal. Mr. Miller recited a list of parts that sounded like made-up robot organs. "It's going to be expensive." "Miller's honest," Tucker said, taking a sip of his coffee. "He won't gouge you." "That's comforting. I'll just pay him in IOUs and charm." She shifted her weight. "Look, about yesterday. You saved me from heat stroke and a very embarrassing meltdown. I want to buy you breakfast." Tucker paused, the mug halfway to his mouth. He looked at her, then at the half-eaten bagel on his plate. "I'm eating breakfast." "Second breakfast, then," she insisted, stepping into the line. "A muffin, a scone, a very masculine croissant. Name it." "I'm good, Chloe." "I insist. My mother raised me to pay my debts, and since I currently can't pay the mechanic, you're the only creditor I can afford." She turned to the barista, a teenager with purple hair who looked entirely too cool to be working in Oakhaven. "Hi, I'll have a large dark roast, black, and whatever he's having. Put it on my tab. I mean, I'll pay for it now. I don't have a tab." She fumbled for her wallet, nearly dropping it into the tip jar. "He's having the rancher special," the barista said, popping gum. "And he already paid." "Well, refund him," Chloe said, waving her credit card. "I am engaging in a hostile takeover of his bill." "Chloe!" Tucker's voice came from behind her, deep and amused. She turned around. He had stood up and was looming over her again. It wasn't fair that he took up so much space. It made her feel like a decorative garden gnome. "Put your money away," he said quietly. "No," she said, lifting her chin. "I need to do this. It's for my dignity. I have very little left, Tucker. Let me buy you a $3 pastry." He looked down at her, a strange softness entering his hazel eyes. He sighed, a sound that rumbled in his chest. "Fine. Blueberry muffin." "Yes." She pumped a fist victoriously, then immediately regretted the movement as it drew attention to her floral upholstery shirt. She turned back to the barista. "1 blueberry muffin for the gentleman, and my coffee. Keep the change?" She handed over the card with a flourish. The machine beeped, declined. Chloe froze. The barista looked at her. Tucker looked at the back of her head. "Try it again," Chloe whispered. "It's temperamental, like my car." The barista sighed and swiped again. "Beep." Declined. "Insufficient funds," the girl announced, loud enough for the entire Tri-County area to hear. Chloe felt the blood drain from her face. The joint account. Her ex-husband, Brad. He must have frozen it or drained it. She had her own account, but the transfer hadn't cleared yet. She was standing in her hometown, wearing her mother's clothes, trying to buy a muffin for her high school crush. And she was broke. She wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole. She would happily live with the mole people. I have cash," she stammered, digging frantically into her purse, coming up with 2 lint-covered quarters and a stick of gum. A large, tanned hand reached over her shoulder, holding a $20 bill. "Add a cinnamon roll to that," Tucker said to the barista, "and put her coffee on it, too." "Tucker, no," Chloe hissed, turning to him, her face burning. "I can't." "You're holding up the line," he murmured, close enough that she could smell that clean rain and soap scent again. He gently took her elbow and steered her away from the register as the barista took his money. He guided her to his table and pulled out the chair opposite his. "Sit." "I am mortified," Chloe said, sinking into the chair and covering her face with her hands. "I am a walking tragedy. I tried to treat you, and you ended up treating me. I am the worst investment you have ever made." Tucker sat down, sliding the plate with the fresh blueberry muffin toward her. "Eat the muffin, Chloe." "It's your muffin." "I don't even like blueberries," he said calmly. "I just said it so you'd stop vibrating." Chloe peeked through her fingers. He was watching her, his chin resting on his hand. He didn't look pitying. He looked entertained. "You knew I was going to fail," she accused. "I didn't know your card would bounce," he said, his voice dropping. "Rough patch?" "Grand Canyon," she admitted, dropping her hands. "My ex. He's thorough." Tucker's eyes darkened instantly. The amusement vanished, replaced by a sudden, sharp intensity. "He took your money?" "It's complicated. Divorce is messy." She picked at the wrapper of the muffin. "I shouldn't be telling you this. We're not friends. We're acquaintances who tow each other's cars." "We're neighbors," Tucker said firmly. "In Oakhaven, that's the same thing." The barista brought their order over, her black coffee and the cinnamon roll he had added. Tucker pushed the cinnamon roll toward her too. I can't eat all this, she protested. You look like a strong wind would blow you over, he said bluntly. Eat, you need the sugar. Chloe took a bite of the muffin. It was warm and sweet, and she had to fight back a sudden wave of tears. Why are you being so nice to me, Tucker? I was annoying in high school. I'm a mess now. You're the king of the ranch. You don't have time for this. Tucker leaned back, taking a sip of his coffee. He adjusted his cap, looking out the window at the sleepy street. Maybe I like the entertainment, he said. But when he looked back at her, that dazzling smile made a rare, brief appearance, softening the hard lines of his face. Besides, you still owe me. Chloe's heart did a traitorous little flip. I'm never going to get out of this debt, am I? Nope, he said, ripping a piece off the cinnamon roll and popping it into his mouth. Better get comfortable. The cinnamon roll was a masterpiece of caloric irresponsibility, and under normal circumstances, Chloe would have composed a sonnet to the frosting. But as she picked at the spiraled dough, the knot in her stomach remained tighter than the lid on a pickle jar. Tucker was working on his coffee with the steady rhythm of a man who had nowhere else to be, though she knew that was a lie. Ranchers always had somewhere to be. Something always needed feeding, fixing, or birthing. Yet he sat there, one arm resting on the back of his chair, creating a buffer zone of calm in the bustling cafe. You're dismantling that thing like you're searching for a wiretap, Tucker observed, nodding at the mangled pastry on her plate. I'm pacing myself. Chloe lied. If I eat it too fast, I'll get a sugar rush, and try to arm wrestle the mayor. Mayor Higgins is 82. I like your odds. She managed a genuine chuckle, the first one that didn't feel forced since she crossed the county line. It was nice. Normal. For a fleeting second, she was just Chloe, eating breakfast with a guy she used to doodle hearts around in her notebook. Then the phone on the table buzzed. It was a harsh, vibrating rattle against the wood. Chloe flinched so hard she nearly knocked over her coffee. The screen lit up, displaying a name that made the blood freeze in her veins. Brad. The air in the coffee shop seemed to vanish. The chatter of the other patrons, the hiss of the espresso machine, the acoustic folk music, it all dropped away, leaving only the terrifying buzzing of the phone. She stared at it, her hands trembling. She knew she should ignore it. She knew she should block the number. But the conditioning ran deep. 5 years of walking on eggshells, of answering on the first ring to avoid an interrogation, of managing his moods like a bomb disposal technician. You gonna get that? Tucker asked. His voice sounded far away. No, I shouldn't. The buzzing stopped. She let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Then it started again immediately. He won't stop, she whispered, half to herself. If I don't answer, he'll call my parents. He'll call the house phone. Chloe, Tucker said. His tone had shifted. It was no longer the casual, dry wit of a moment ago. It was low and alert. She didn't look at him. She couldn't. She picked up the phone, her fingers feeling numb, and slid the icon to answer. She brought the device to her ear, shrinking in on herself, her shoulders hunching forward instinctively to make herself a smaller target. Hello? Nice of you to finally pick up. Brad's voice was smooth, cultured, and laced with the venom she knew so well. I see you've tried to use the card. I needed coffee, Chloe stammered, her gaze fixed on a knot in the wooden table. Brad, why did you cancel the card? That money is marital assets. He cut in. And since you decided to abandon your marriage and run away like a petulant child, I decided to secure our assets. You want money, Chloe? You come home and ask for it properly. I'm not coming home. It's over. The papers are paper, he scoffed. You think you can survive out there on your own? You? Chloe, look at yourself. You can't even change a light bulb without crying. You're pathetic. You're nothing without me. You're just a washed-up drama student with no skills and no future. Tears pricked her eyes, hot and stinging. The words hit their mark with surgical precision. He knew exactly where her insecurities lived, and he was pressing on them with a thumbtack. Please, Brad, just release the funds for the car. I'm stranded. Stranded? Good. Maybe it will give you time to think about what a mistake you're making. You'll be begging to come back in a week. And when you do, we're going to have a very long talk about gratitude. I'm not coming back, she whispered, but her voice wavered. It lacked conviction. She sounded like the scared little mouse he always told her she was. Stop being dramatic. It's embarrassing. Does your mother know you're broke? Does your father know his little princess is a failure? Chloe gripped the phone so hard her knuckles turned white she couldn't breathe. The cafe was closing in on her. Suddenly, a large, warm hand covered hers on the table. She looked up, startled. Tucker hadn't moved from his seat, but he had leaned forward. His face was a mask of stone, but his eyes were blazing with a cold, hard fury that wasn't directed at her. He was looking at the phone as if he wanted to reach through the connection and strangle the person on the other end. His hand was rough, calloused, and impossibly steady. It grounded her. It was a physical anchor in the storm of Brad's voice. Tucker didn't say a word. He just held her gaze, and then, very deliberately, he tapped his own ear and then pointed at the red end call button on her screen. Hang up. Are you listening to me, Chloe? Brad snapped. I said. Chloe looked at Tucker. He nodded, a microscopic movement of his chin. Do it. She took a shaky breath. She looked at the phone. I have to go, Brad, she said. Her voice was still quiet, but it was steady. Do not call me again. She pressed the red button before he could respond. She set the phone down on the table face down, as if it were a radioactive isotope. Silence stretched between them. Chloe pulled her hand away from Tucker's, feeling a sudden flush of shame. He had seen it. He had seen her cower. He had seen the strong, funny woman act crumble instantly into a frightened victim. I'm sorry, she murmured, wiping angrily at a tear that had escaped. I'm so sorry. You didn't need to hear that. That was drama. I hate drama. Who was it? Tucker asked. His voice was incredibly quiet. My ex. Well, soon-to-be ex. She wrapped her arms around herself. He enjoys commentary. He enjoys making you look like you're about to jump out of your skin, Tucker corrected. He wasn't looking at her anymore. He was staring out the window, his jaw muscle jumping rhythmically. He, the one who cut the money? Yes. He says I'm well. He says a lot of things. She let out a wet, hollow laugh. He's got a point. I'm 30 years old, eating a charity cinnamon roll, living in my parents' guest room. Tucker turned his gaze back to her. The intensity of it pinned her to the chair. He's wrong. You don't know that, Tucker. You haven't seen me in 12 years. Maybe I am pathetic. I know people, Tucker said simply, and I know bullies. That sounded like a bully. He picked up his coffee cup, drained the last of it, and set it down with a definitive clack. You're not going back to him. It wasn't a question. No, Chloe said, and this time she felt it. No, I'd rather live in my broken car. Good. Tucker stood up. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a few bills, tossing them on the table for a tip. Come on, where are we going? Chloe asked, scrambling to grab her purse and the terrifying phone. You need a job, he said, putting his cap back on and adjusting the brim. You can't pay Miller with IOUs, and you can't wait for the lawyers to unlock your cash. You need money now. I can't work at the ranch, Tucker. I'm allergic to hay, and manual labor, and probably cows. I didn't say the ranch. He held the door open for her, the rush of humid air hitting them as they stepped out onto the sidewalk. The summer fair is coming up in 3 weeks. The town council is losing their minds because Mrs. Gable broke her hip and she usually runs the coordination. Chloe stopped in her tracks. The Oakhaven Summer Fair? The one with the pie contest and the greased pig chase? The very same. And you think they'd hire me? You were the president of the drama club. You organized the senior talent show. I remember you shouting at the lighting crew until they cried, but the show started on time. Chloe blushed. I was passionate. You were effective, Tucker said. They need a coordinator. It pays. It's temporary. And it'll keep you busy so you don't stare at that phone all day. He walked toward his truck, expecting her to follow. Tucker, she called out. He stopped and turned. Thank you, she said softly, for the hand on the table. He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable again. He nodded once. Don't let him talk to you like that, Chloe, he said, his voice rough. You're worth more than that. He opened the passenger door. Get in. We're going to City Hall. As Chloe climbed into the truck, she realized that for the first time in 5 years, someone had stood between her and the darkness, not to control her, but to shield her. And that terrified her almost as much as Brad did. Almost. 4 days later, Chloe was officially the coordinator of the Oakhaven Summer Fair, a title that sounded prestigious but mostly involved herding cats, mediating disputes about jam placement, and sweating. The town square, a quaint patch of green usually reserved for picnicking families and squirrels with aggression issues, had been transformed into a construction zone. Booths were half-assembled, bunting was tangling in the wind, and the air smelled of funnel cake grease and sawdust, though not the romantic kind, just the kind that got in your eyes. Chloe stood in the center of the chaos, clutching a clipboard like it was a holy relic. She had a walkie-talkie clipped to her belt that she didn't know how to use, and a pencil stuck in her messy bun. No, Mrs. Higgins, she shouted over the sound of a hammer. The petting zoo cannot be next to the pie-eating contest. We had an incident in '98 involving a goat and a blueberry cobbler, and we agreed never again. She ticked a box on her clipboard with aggressive force. She was tired, her feet throbbed, and she was pretty sure she had developed a caffeine dependency that would concern a medical professional. But she was doing it. She was working. She wasn't thinking about the divorce papers sitting on her dresser or the silence of her phone. "Hey, boss," Chloe spun around. Tucker was leaning against the bed of his truck, which was parked on the grass. Illegally, she was sure, but no one ticketed Tucker. He was unloading bales of straw, hefting them 2 at a time as if they were pillows. He wore a faded green t-shirt that was soaked through in a V-shape down his back, and his biceps were flexing in a way that should have been illegal in a public park. "Don't call me boss," Chloe said, marching over to him. "I feel like a fraud. I just spent 20 minutes arguing with the mayor about whether or not we can legally raffle off a chainsaw." "Can you?" Tucker asked, dropping the bales near the designated barnyard zone. "Apparently not without a waiver." "Who knew?" She sighed, blowing a stray hair out of her face. "You're early with the straw." "Cows woke me up," he said. "Figured I'd get it done before the heat really hits." He wiped his forehead with his arm. "You look busy." "I am drowning, Tucker. Drowning in logistics. And speaking of drowning, I have a crisis." She pointed a trembling finger toward a pile of heavy white canvas and metal poles in the center of the lawn. "The pavilion of pastries." "The what?" "The big tent for the baked goods. It needs to go up. My setup crew consists of Mr. Abernathy, who has a bad back, and the high school chess club, who are very sweet but have 0 upper body strength. If I don't get that tent up by noon, the meringues will melt, and there will be a riot." Tucker looked at the pile of canvas, then at the scrawny teenagers currently poking it with a pole. "You need help," he stated. "I need a crane. Or a miracle. Or a very strong man who feels a deep sense of obligation, because I once bought him a— Wait, no! You bought me breakfast. Dang it." Tucker cracked a smile. It was slow and lazy, like molasses. "I'll help you with the tent, Chloe." "Really? You don't have to go ranch things?" "The ranch will survive an hour." He walked past her toward the tent, pulling work gloves from his back pocket. "Hey, boys," he called out to the chess club. "Grab the stakes. I'll take the center pole." For the next 45 minutes, Chloe watched in a state of mild hypnosis as Tucker orchestrated the raising of the pavilion of pastries. He moved with an economy of motion that was fascinating to watch. He didn't grunt or strain, he just braced his legs, gripped the heavy iron poles, and lifted when he hammered the stakes into the ground. Swinging a sledgehammer with rhythmic, powerful strokes, Chloe found herself fanning her face with her clipboard. It was definitely just the heat, 90 degrees in the shade, that was all. "Center pole is secure," Tucker called out, his voice carrying easily across the grass. "Chloe, grab that guy line. Keep it taut while I tension the corner." "Right, on it!" She scrambled to grab the rope, digging her heels into the turf. They worked in tandem, shouting commands and adjustments. For the first time all week, the chaos in her head quieted down. There was just the work, the rope in her hands, the sight of Tucker across the tent, his shirt clinging to his chest, his eyes focused and intense. When the last stake was driven, the tent stood magnificent and white against the blue sky, ready to house 300 pies. Tucker walked over, pulling off his gloves. He was sweating freely now, his hair damp under his cap. He grabbed a water bottle from a cooler and downed half of it in one go. "Nice tent," he said, wiping his mouth. "It's a masterpiece," Chloe agreed, looking up at him. "Thank you. Seriously, I would be buried under that canvas right now if not for you." "You're doing a good job, Chloe," he said quietly. She blinked. "What?" "The fair. You stepped in last minute, you're handling it." He looked around at the bustling square. "It's organized. More than when Mrs. Gable does it." Chloe felt a lump form in her throat. It was such a small thing, a simple observation, but coming from him, and after years of Brad telling her she couldn't organize a grocery list, it felt like a medal. Thanks, I'm trying." "Stop doubting yourself," he said, his voice dropping to that low register that made her toes curl. "You're smart, you're capable, you always were. I was a mess in high school, Tucker." "You were loud," he corrected, "and funny, and you didn't take crap from anyone. I liked that about you." Chloe stared at him. The ambient noise of the town square seemed to fade away. "He liked that about me?" Tucker shifted, looking suddenly uncomfortable, as if he'd said too much. He looked down at his boots. "Anyway, I got more straw to move." "Right. Straw. Cows." Chloe cleared her throat, trying to restart her brain. "Well, thanks again. I owe you a lot of muffins." "Just one will do." He turned to walk back to his truck. Chloe watched him go, feeling a strange mixture of hope and terrifying vulnerability. Maybe she could do this. Maybe she could stay here. Maybe she wasn't just a failure. A low, purring sound cut through the air. It wasn't the rattle of a farm truck or the whine of a minivan. It was the distinct, precision-engineered hum of a high-performance engine. Chloe frowned. She turned toward the street. A sleek, silver Mercedes sedan was slowly cruising down Main Street, looking like a spaceship that had landed in a cornfield. It stood out so starkly against the backdrop of dusty pickups and rusted sedans that people actually stopped hammering to look. The car slowed as it approached the town square. The tinted windows were black, impenetrable. Chloe's stomach dropped. The clipboard slipped from her numb fingers and clattered onto the grass. No, it couldn't be. He wouldn't come here. He hated small towns. He hated driving more than an hour. The Mercedes pulled over to the curb, right next to where Tucker was securing the tailgate of his truck. The engine cut. The silence that followed was deafening. The driver's door opened. First came the polished Italian leather loafers. Then the pressed charcoal dress slacks. Then the white linen shirt, unbuttoned just enough to look casual, but costing more than Chloe's entire car. Brad stepped out. He put on his sunglasses, adjusting them on his nose. He looked immaculate, not a hair out of place. He looked like he had just stepped out of a boardroom in the city, not driven 3 hours into the country. He scanned the park, a look of mild distaste on his handsome face. Then, his gaze locked onto her. A slow, predatory smile spread across his lips. "Chloe, darling," he called out, his voice smooth and projecting perfectly across the distance. "Surprise." The blood drained from Chloe's face so fast she swayed. The world tilted. The safety she had felt 5 seconds ago evaporated, replaced by a cold, primal terror. Tucker, who had been about to get into his truck, froze. He looked at the man in the Mercedes. Then he looked at Chloe. He saw the color leave her face. He saw the way her hands started to shake. He slowly closed his truck door. He didn't get in. He turned, crossing his arms over his chest and planted his feet wide. Brad began to walk toward her, stepping onto the grass with an air of ownership. "You're hard to find," Brad said, stepping over a coil of rope. "But I thought, hey, if the mountain won't come to me..." "What are you doing here?" Chloe whispered. Her voice was thin, reedy. "I came to collect you," Brad said, stopping a few feet away. He looked her up and down, sneering at her oversized t-shirt and messy hair. "Look at you. You look like a refugee. It's pathetic, really." "Leave her alone." The voice was a low growl, coming from the side. Brad turned, looking amused. He looked up, way up, at Tucker, who had moved silently to stand just behind Chloe's right shoulder. "And who is this?" Brad asked, letting out a short, dismissive laugh. "The hired help?" Tucker didn't blink. He didn't smile. He looked like a mountain that was about to decide to cause a landslide. "I'm the guy who's going to tell you to get back in your car," Tucker said. Brad took off his sunglasses, his eyes cold and hard. "This is a private conversation between husband and wife. Walk away, cowboy." "She doesn't look like she wants to talk," Tucker said, taking a step forward. Brad stepped closer to Chloe, invading her space, ignoring Tucker. He reached out to grab her arm. "Get in the car, Chloe. We're done playing games." Chloe flinched back, but before she could move, a large, tanned hand shot out and clamped around Brad's wrist. Tucker stopped Brad's hand inches from Chloe's arm. "Don't," Tucker said. The word was simple, but the menace behind it was heavy enough to crush bone. "Touch her." Brad stared at his trapped wrist. Then, up at Tucker, his face flushing with rage. The town square was dead silent. Everyone was watching. The silence in the town square was absolute. Even the birds seemed to have decided this was a bad time to chirp. Tucker's hand was a vice around Brad's wrist. It wasn't just a grip. It was a statement of geological permanence. Brad tugged, his face reddening as he realized that his gym-sculpted muscles were entirely decorative compared to the kind of strength built by 20 years of hauling hay bales and wrestling calves. "Let go of me," Brad hissed, his voice losing its smooth, cultured veneer. "That is assault." "It's a correction," Tucker said. His voice was terrifyingly calm. He didn't look at Brad's hand. He looked straight into Brad's eyes, his own hazel gaze flattened into hard flint. "In this town, we don't grab women, especially when they're shaking." Chloe stood frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She watched the color rise in Brad's neck, a sign she knew usually preceded a thrown object or a hole punched in drywall. "You have 5 seconds to release me," Brad spat, "or I will own this town by the time my lawyers are done with you. I will take your truck, your boots, and whatever pathetic patch of dirt you call a farm." Tucker's jaw tightened. "You can try." He didn't let go. If anything, his grip tightened. The tendons in Brad's hand flared white. "Tucker," Chloe whispered, finding her voice. It was small, but it was there. Let him go, please. He'll do it. He loves lawsuits. Tucker's eyes flickered to her. He saw the genuine fear there. Not for herself, but for him. All right, break it up. Break it up before I have to do paperwork. The booming voice came from the sidewalk. Sheriff Grady, a man whose belt buckle was almost as wide as his smile usually was, marched onto the grass. Today, however, he wasn't smiling. One hand rested casually, but intentionally, on his belt, near his holster. Tucker, release the tourist. Grady commanded, though his tone was more weary than authoritative. Sir, step back from the lady. Tucker held the stare for one more heartbeat, a final warning communicated in the silent language of men who aren't afraid to bleed, before he shoved Brad's hand away with disgust. Brad stumbled back a step, rubbing his wrist. He straightened his expensive shirt, regaining his composure with frightening speed. He turned to the sheriff, flashing a practiced, charming smile that didn't reach his cold eyes. Officer, Brad said, stepping forward. Thank God you're here. This individual assaulted me. I was simply trying to speak to my wife. Sheriff Grady stopped between them. He looked at Brad, taking in the loafers and the attitude, then looked at Tucker, who was vibrating with suppressed rage, and finally at Chloe, who looked ready to faint. That true, Chloe? Grady asked gently. He your husband? Yes, Chloe said, wrapping her arms around her stomach. But we're separated, Sheriff. I told him to leave. And he grabbed her, Tucker added, his voice like gravel. I stopped him. I was escorting her to my car, Brad corrected smoothly. She's clearly distressed. She's not thinking clearly. I'm here to take her home to get the help she needs. I don't need help, Brad, Chloe said, surprised by the sudden flash of anger that cut through her fear. I need a divorce lawyer and a restraining order. Brad's smile faltered, replaced by a look of disappointed patience, like a parent dealing with a toddler. See? Hysterical. Officer, surely you can see. It's Sheriff, Grady interrupted, and what I see is a woman who asked you to back off. In Oakhaven, no means no, even if you're driving a Mercedes. Especially if you're driving a Mercedes. Brad's eyes narrowed. I see. Small-town justice. How quaint. Mr. Sterling. Bradley Sterling. Well, Mr. Sterling, Grady hooked his thumbs in his belt, you're disturbing the peace, and you're trespassing on a permitted event site. Miss Paxton is the coordinator of this here fair, and if she says you're disrupting her work, then you gotta go. Brad looked around. A small crowd had gathered. Mr. Abernathy was holding a hammer menacingly. The chess club boys were standing behind Tucker, looking like a very unthreatening but loyal phalanx. Brad realized he had lost the room. He chuckled, a dark, humorless sound. He dusted off his sleeve. Fine, I can see tempers are running high. I'll give you some space, Chloe. He turned to her, ignoring Tucker and the sheriff. But I'm not leaving, darling. I just checked into the Oakhaven Inn. I've booked the suite for the week. I'm not going back to the city without you. He took a step closer, lowering his voice so only she and Tucker could hear. You have no money. You have no car. You have nothing. When you're ready to stop playing peasant, come find me. Room 1. He turned on his heel, walked back to his silver car, and slid inside. The engine purred to life, and he drove off slowly, the tires crunching loudly on the gravel, leaving a cloud of dust that settled over the silent town square. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then, Chloe's knees buckled. She didn't hit the ground. Tucker was there instantly, his arms sweeping around her waist to catch her. He pulled her against his side, taking her weight effortlessly. I got you, he murmured against the top of her head. Steady. He's staying, Chloe whispered, trembling uncontrollably. He's not leaving. He's going to charm everyone. He's going to twist everything until I look like the crazy one. He's not charming anyone here, Tucker said firmly. He looked over her head at Sheriff Grady. You okay, Chloe? Grady asked, stepping closer. I'm fine, Sheriff. I'm sorry for the scene. Don't apologize for him, Grady said. He tipped his hat back. I'll make a call over to the inn. Let Mrs. Higgins know her guest is on my radar. If he jaywalks, I want to know about it. Thanks, Grady, Tucker said. You keep cool, Tucker, the sheriff warned, pointing a finger at him. I know you. If you rearrange his face, I have to arrest you. And I hate paperwork. I won't touch him, Tucker said. Unless he touches her again. Grady sighed, shook his head, and wandered off to disperse the onlookers. Show's over, folks. Back to your booths. Those pies won't bake themselves. Tucker turned Chloe so she was facing him. He kept his hands on her upper arms, steadying her. His face was still hard, but his eyes were frantically searching hers for damage. Did he hurt you? No. Just my pride. She took a shaky breath, inhaling the scent of hay and sweat that clung to Tucker. It was grounding. He's right, Tucker. He can drag this out. He can make my life hell. He's a bully with a checkbook, Tucker said. That works in the city. Out here, currency is different. He called me a peasant, she said, a hysterical giggle bubbling up. Who says that? Is he a feudal lord? He's an idiot, Tucker said. Come on. Where? You're done for the day. The chess club can finish the bunting. I'm taking you to get food, and then we're gonna figure this out. I can't go to my parents' house, Chloe said quickly. If he knows where they live, he'll go there. He'll try to talk to my dad. He'll spin some story about how I'm having a breakdown. Tucker paused. He looked toward the road where the Mercedes had disappeared, then back at the pavilion of pastries. Then you're not going to your parents' house, he decided. I don't have anywhere else, Tucker. The inn is occupied by the enemy. My place, he said. Chloe stared at him. Your ranch? I've got a guest cabin. It's on the North Ridge. Secluded. You have to have a code to get through the main gate. He adjusted his cap, looking determined. He can't get to you there. And I've got 3 dogs that don't like strangers in loafers. Tucker, I can't. That's too much. I'm already a charity case. It's not charity, he said, his voice dropping, intense and rough. It's protection. Let me do this, Chloe. Let me help you. She looked at him. Really looked at him. The boy she knew was gone, replaced by a man who stood between her and the world like a shield wall. She was tired of fighting alone. She was tired of being scared. Okay, she whispered. Okay? Good. He steered her toward his truck. Let's go. As she climbed into the passenger seat of the dusty pickup, Chloe felt a strange sensation. The fear was still there, buzzing in the background, but for the first time in years, she felt something else rising to meet it. She wasn't just the girl who ran away anymore. She was the girl with the cowboy, and God help Brad if he tried to cross that line again. The drive to the Double D Ranch took 20 minutes, taking them off the paved county roads and onto a well-maintained gravel track that wound through rolling green hills. Tucker slowed the truck as they approached a massive iron gate flanked by stone pillars. He rolled down the window, punched a code into a keypad, and the gate swung open with a heavy, reassuring hum. Fort Knox? Chloe asked, looking at the security cameras mounted on the pillars. Keeps the cows in, keeps the trouble out, Tucker said, driving through. The gates closed automatically behind them. Chloe felt a physical weight lift off her chest as the lock engaged. It was a barrier, a line in the sand. Brad and his silver Mercedes and his Italian loafers were on the other side. Here, it was just open sky, endless green fields, and cows, lots of cows. I didn't realize the operation was this big, she murmured, watching a herd graze in the distance. It's grown, Tucker said simply. We supplied beef to half the restaurants in the state. They drove past the main house, a sprawling 2-story farmhouse with a wraparound porch that looked like it belonged on a postcard, and continued up a dirt path toward a ridge of trees. Nestled against the tree line was a smaller structure. It was a cabin made of dark timber with a metal roof and a wide front porch. The bunkhouse, Tucker announced, putting the truck in park. It used to be for seasonal hands, but I renovated it a few years back. My sister stays here when she visits with her kids. Chloe climbed out. The air up here was cooler, cleaner. 3 dogs, a border collie, a blue heeler, and something that looked like a bear crossed with a rug, came bounding off the porch of the cabin, barking joyfully. Down, Tucker commanded softly. The dogs instantly sat, tails thumping a rhythm on the dirt. That's Buster, Scout, and Tank, Tucker pointed to the bear rug dog. Tank is useless as a herd dog. But if anyone tries to come up those stairs who isn't me, he turns into a wolf. Hi, guys, Chloe said, holding out a hand. Tank immediately shoved his massive head under her palm. Okay, I feel safer already. Tucker led her up the steps and unlocked the door. The interior was nothing like the rustic shack she had expected. It was an open concept space with polished wood floors, a stone fireplace, and a kitchen that was nicer than the one she had shared with Brad. There was a leather sofa that looked capable of swallowing a person whole, and a large quilt draped over the back. It's wow, Chloe said, spinning in a slow circle. This is nicer than my first 3 apartments combined. Fridge is stocked, Tucker said, walking into the kitchen and opening the stainless steel door. I usually keep it full for the guys during calving season. We've got steaks, eggs, potatoes, beer. Beer, Chloe said. Beer sounds like a food group right now. Tucker grabbed 2 bottles of local ale, twisted the caps off, and handed one to her. He took a long pull from his own, leaning his hip against the counter. He watched her, his eyes tracking the way she held the bottle with both hands, as if it were a source of warmth. You're safe here, Chloe, he said. I know, she whispered. It's just, he's so good at getting inside my head. For a minute there, back at the square, I felt like I was the crazy one, like I was making a scene. That's how guys like him operate, Tucker said, his voice hard. They make you doubt the ground you're standing on, so you have to hold on to them for balance. Chloe looked up at him, surprised by the insight. That's exactly it. How do you know that? I watch people, he shrugged, and I listen to podcasts while I'm fixing fences. True crime, mostly. You learn the patterns. He set his beer down. Hungry? I'm starving, but I don't want to impose. I can make a sandwich. I'm cooking, he interrupted, opening a drawer and pulling out a cast-iron skillet. Sit down, relax, talk to the dogs. Chloe sat on a bar stool at the kitchen island, nursing her beer, while Tucker Donovan went to work. Watching Tucker cook was a confusing experience for her libido. He moved with the same efficient grace he used for everything else. He seasoned 2 massive ribeyes, chopped potatoes with terrifying speed, and managed 3 pans on the stove without breaking a sweat. It was domestic, but in a very rugged, capable way. So, she said, trying to fill the silence that felt too intimate. High school. Tucker paused while flipping a steak. What about it? You said I was funny. I thought you hated me. You and your friends were the kings of the county. I was the girl with paint in her hair who quoted Shakespeare in the cafeteria. Tucker looked at her over his shoulder. I didn't hate you. I was intimidated by you. Chloe choked on her beer. I'm sorry, what? You? Intimidated by me? You were the quarterback. You drove a truck. You had a Letterman jacket that defied the laws of physics with how good it looked. Tucker turned around, leaning back against the stove, crossing his arms. The firelight flickered behind him. You were always on, he said thoughtfully. You had this energy. You walked into a room and the whole temperature changed. You were going places. New York, LA, somewhere big. I knew I was staying here. I was going to be a rancher. Just like my dad, just like his dad. That's not a bad thing, Tucker. I know. I love this life. But back then, I felt like a stump. And you were a firework. I figured if I talked to you, I'd just bore you. Chloe stared at him, her mouth slightly agape. I wasn't a firework, Tucker. I was a sparkler that burned out halfway through. And you aren't a stump. You're an oak tree. You're solid. You provide shade. An oak tree, he repeated, a slow grin spreading across his face. I'll take it. He turned back to the stove. Plates are in the cupboard to your left. They ate at the small wooden table near the window. The sun was setting, casting long golden shadows across the fields. The steak was perfect, seared on the outside, tender pink on the inside. The potatoes were crispy and salty. It was the best meal Chloe had eaten in 5 years. So, Tucker said, cutting into his steak. What's the plan? He says he's staying a week. I have to work, Chloe said, stabbing a potato. I need the money, and I need the reference. If I hide out here, he wins. He proves I'm weak. Agreed, Tucker nodded. So you go to work. But he'll show up. He'll hover. He'll make snide comments about the bunting. Let him hover, Tucker said. I've got some free time this week. Fences are mended. Calves are weaned. I can hang around the square. Move some hay. Lift some heavy things. You're going to bodyguard me? I'm going to volunteer for the fair, he corrected, taking a sip of beer. Civic duty. You hate crowds, Tucker. I hate stupid crowds. The fair is fine. Plus, I like pie. Chloe felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the alcohol. You're really going to do that? He's not getting near you again, Chloe. Not while you're in my town. They finished eating in a comfortable silence. When the plates were cleared, Tucker walked her to the door. Lock it behind me, he instructed. There's a keypad on the inside, too. No one gets in without the code. Tank will sleep on the porch. Where are you going? Main house. It's just down the hill. Right. Of course. She felt a sudden, sharp pang of disappointment that she immediately squashed. Tucker stood in the doorway, the twilight framing his silhouette. He looked down at her, his eyes dark and unreadable. He reached out, his hand hovering for a second before he gently tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers grazed her cheek, rough skin against soft. Chloe held her breath. The air between them crackled. It was the kind of tension that usually preceded a kiss in the movies she used to audition for. Tucker's gaze dropped to her lips, then snapped back up to her eyes. He pulled his hand back. Good night, Chloe, he said, his voice rougher than usual. Good night, Tucker. He turned and walked down the steps, whistling for the other 2 dogs. Chloe watched him walk into the darkness until he was just a shadow. She closed the door and locked it. She leaned her back against the wood, listening to the heavy thud of Tank the dog, settling down on the porch mat outside. She was safe. She was full. And for the first time in a very long time, she wasn't thinking about what she had lost. She was thinking about the man who thought she was a firework. She went to the bedroom, found a pile of clean towels and a fresh t-shirt laid out on the bed, and smiled. The next morning, the rumors began before Chloe's feet even hit the pavement of Main Street. Tucker had insisted on driving her into town, claiming he needed to pick up feed, a transparent lie, as the feed store was in the opposite direction. As she climbed out of his dusty blue truck in front of the community center, she felt the collective gaze of Oakhaven latch onto her. Mrs. Higgins was sweeping her porch 3 doors down, watching them with the intensity of a sniper. 2 women walking their poodles stopped mid-stride, heads swiveling in perfect synchronization. "They're watching," Chloe whispered, shielding her eyes with her purse. "I can feel them calculating the timeline of my moral decay." Tucker walked around the truck, adjusting his cap. He looked unbothered. "Let 'em look. Keeps 'em from watching daytime TV." "They think we're, she hissed, trotting to keep up with his long strides. "Co-conspirators in the great fair setup?" Tucker asked innocently. "Lovers on the lam, Bonnie and Clyde, but with more denim and less bank robbery." Tucker stopped at the door of the community center and held it open. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You talk too much, Paxton. It's a nervous tic. Would you prefer I yodel?" "Please don't." Their mission for the morning was unglamorous. Raid the community center attic for vintage decorations. The budget for the fair was approximately $12 and a bag of lint, so they were relying on, quote, repurposed heritage items, aka junk. The attic was a cavernous, stifling space that smelled of mothballs and history. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light cutting through the dormer windows. It was packed floor to ceiling with boxes, mannequins that looked disturbingly human in the dim light, and holiday decorations from the Nixon administration. "Okay," Chloe said, putting her hands on her hips. "We need bunting, sturdy tablecloths, and anything that doesn't look like it's haunted by a Victorian child. Dive in." Tucker began shifting heavy crates, marked Christmas 1990, while Chloe tackled a stack of boxes near the window. For a while, the only sounds were the shuffling of cardboard and Chloe's occasional sneeze. "Found a plastic reindeer with 3 legs, Tucker announced from the shadows. "Festive. Put it in the maybe pile." Chloe tugged at a box wedged under a stack of old choir robes. It gave way with a cloud of dust, sliding across the floorboards. The masking tape on the top was yellow and brittle. In faded marker, someone had scrawled, "Senior Talent Show, 2008. Props, and Miss Chloe froze. Her hand hovered over the lid. "Tucker," she said, her voice sounding small in the big room. "Yeah?" He appeared from behind a rack of costumes, wiping dust from his hands onto his jeans. "Look what I found." He walked over, his boots thumping heavily on the wood. He crouched down next to her, his knee brushing her arm. He read the label. 2008, he mused. "Our year. The year of the incident." She corrected, grimacing. "Open it." Chloe peeled back the tape. Inside, it was a time capsule of teenage angst. There were glittery top hats, a broken microphone stand, and a stack of glossy programs. On top lay a feathered boa that had seen better days. Chloe picked up one of the programs. The cover featured a poorly clipped art image of a spotlight, and the words, "Oakhaven High presents A Night Under the Stars." "I haven't thought about this night in years," she whispered, tracing the date. "I blocked it out. It was the night I decided I was going to leave this town forever." Tucker was quiet, watching her profile. "You were great that night." Chloe let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "Great? Tucker, are you delusional? I had a panic attack in the wings right before my monologue. I was hyperventilating so loud the microphone picked it up. I sounded like a dying pug." "You went out there," he said. "I went out there, forgot my first 3 lines, improvised a joke about the cafeteria meatloaf, and then rushed through the rest of it at triple speed. It was a disaster." She looked down at the program, her thumb hovering over her own name. "I ran off stage and cried in the prop closet for an hour. I remember hearing people laughing." She looked up at him. "I remember seeing you." Tucker stiffened slightly. "Me?" "Yeah. When I finally came out of the closet, my mascara was running down my chin. You were standing by the back exit with your football buddies. I saw you look at me, and then you turned to them and said something, and you all walked away. I thought you were mocking me." The attic went silent. A pigeon cooed from the rafters. Tucker reached out and took the program from her hand. He looked at it for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Is that what you thought?" he asked quietly. "Well, yeah, you were the cool guy. I was the theater geek having a meltdown. It fits the narrative." Tucker sighed. A long exhale that seemed to deflate his shoulders. He shifted, sitting fully on the floor, his back against a crate of Christmas lights. He took off his cap and ran a hand through his sandy hair. I wasn't mocking you, Chloe. Then what were you doing? I was guarding the door. Chloe blinked. What? I was backstage helping with the set changes. Coach made the team do it for credit, Tucker explained, staring at the dust swirling in the light beam. I saw you run into the closet. You were shaking. Then I saw Jason Miller and his idiot friends heading that way. They were laughing about your meatloaf joke, looking to give you a hard time. He looked at her then, his hazel eyes intense and earnest. I stood in front of the door so they couldn't get to you. I told them to get lost. I stood there for 45 minutes until I heard you stop crying. When you came out, I turned to the guys and told them that if anyone said a word to you, they'd answer to me. Chloe's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She replayed the memory in her head. The shadowy hallway. Tucker's broad back. The way he had turned to his friends. And you all walked away. They hadn't walked away because they were laughing. They walked away because he was leading them away from her. You protected me? She whispered. You were always so hard on yourself, Tucker said softly. You didn't need Jason Miller making it worse. I thought you were brave. Getting up there alone? I'd rather face a stampede. Chloe felt a sudden stinging in her eyes that had nothing to do with the dust. The narrative she had carried for 12 years, the one where she was the outcast and he was the indifferent king, shattered. I never knew, she said. I spent 12 years thinking you thought I was a joke. I never thought you were a joke, Chloe. Never. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I always thought you were incredible. Too bright for this place. I knew you'd leave. I just wanted to make sure you got out in one piece. The distance between them on the dusty floor felt charged with electricity. Chloe looked at this man, this steady, silent oak tree of a man, and felt her heart do a slow, terrifying somersault. Tucker, she breathed. She reached out, covering his hand with hers. His skin was warm. He turned his hand over, interlacing his fingers with hers. It was a natural fit. We should find the bunting, Tucker said, his voice husky. He didn't pull his hand away. Screw the bunting, Chloe said, her voice trembling slightly. Tell me what else I got wrong. Tucker looked at her lips. He leaned in, just an inch. The air in the attic grew heavy, the heat sudden and intense. You got it wrong about the meatloaf joke? He murmured, leaning closer. It was funny. Chloe let out a breathless laugh. You're impossible. I'm literal. He was close enough now that she could see the flecks of gold in his eyes. She tilted her chin up. The dust, the heat, the smell of mothballs, it all faded. There was just him. Creak. The attic door slammed open downstairs. Chloe, you up there? Mayor Higgins is asking about the raffle permits. The voice of Mrs. Gable, the town librarian and fair matriarch, echoed up the stairwell like a foghorn. Tucker and Chloe sprang apart as if they had been electrocuted. Tucker scrambled to his feet, jamming his hat back on his head so fast it was crooked. Chloe grabbed the feather boa and held it in front of her like a shield. Up here, Mrs. Gable, Chloe shouted, her voice squeaking. Just looking for tablecloths. Well, hurry up, and tell Tucker to move his truck. He's blocking the handicap ramp. Tucker looked down at Chloe. His face was flushed, and he looked thoroughly rattled. He offered her a hand to help her up. Tablecloths, he muttered. Right, tablecloths. Chloe took his hand. He pulled her up, but he didn't let go immediately. He gave her fingers a quick, firm squeeze. Later, he said. Later, she promised. They descended the stairs back into the reality of Oakhaven, leaving the box of 2008 memories open in the dust. The truth finally aired out. The sky over Oakhaven turned the color of a bruised plum around 4 in the afternoon. The air, previously thick enough to chew, suddenly went still. It was that ominous, heavy silence that every Midwesterner knew in their bones, the calm before the sky decided to throw a tantrum. Chloe was standing on a ladder, attempting to hang a string of lights that refused to cooperate, when the first drop of rain hit her cheek. It felt like a warning tap. Oh, she muttered, looking up. A low growl of thunder rolled across the valley, shaking the ground beneath the ladder. Everyone take cover! Mayor Higgins shouted through a megaphone that squealed with feedback. This is not a drill! Save the papier-mâché! Chaos erupted. Vendors scrambled to throw tarps over their wares. The high school marching band, who had been practicing formation, scattered like bowling pins. Chloe! Tucker's voice cut through the rising wind. He was running toward her from the north end of the square, pointing at the sky. Get down! It's gonna blow! Chloe scrambled down the ladder just as the heavens opened up. It wasn't a gentle summer shower. It was a deluge. The wind picked up, whipping the decorative flags into a frenzy and threatening to turn the smaller tents into kites. "The pavilion?" Chloe shrieked, pointing at the main tent. The wind had caught under the canvas, and the stakes on the west side were pulling out of the soft earth. "If that goes, the whole fair is cancelled." "I got the corner!" Tucker yelled over the roar of the rain. "Grab the mallet!" They sprinted toward the buckling tent. The rain was torrential, soaking them to the bone in seconds. Chloe's hair was plastered to her face, and her oversized t-shirt clung to her like a second skin. She grabbed the heavy rubber mallet from the grass, slipping in the mud but kept moving. Tucker reached the corner pole, which was lifting dangerously off the ground. He wrapped his arms around the thick metal, his boots sliding in the deepening slush. "Hit the stake!" he roared, using his weight to wrestle the pole back down. Hard! Chloe fell to her knees in the mud. She grabbed the iron stake, positioned it, and swung the mallet with every ounce of strength she possessed. Wham! Again! Wham! The wind howled, tearing at the canvas above them. The tent flapped violently, sounding like a gunshot. Tucker's face was set in a grimace of exertion, the muscles in his arms corded and tight as he fought the gale-force wind. "One more!" Chloe swung with a primal scream of frustration. Frustration at the weather, at Brad, at her broken car, at everything. The stake drove deep into the earth. "Got it!" she yelled, spitting rain out of her mouth. Tucker didn't let go immediately. He held the pole for another few seconds, testing the tension. The wind gusted again, but the stake held. The tent shuddered but stayed put. He released the pole and slumped against it, breathing hard. He looked down at her. She was on her hands and knees in the mud, looking like a drowned rat, shivering violently. He reached down, grabbed her by the arms, and hauled her to her feet. "You okay?" he shouted over the thunder. "I'm wet," she yelled back, which was the understatement of the century. "And I think I swallowed a bug." A crack of lightning split the sky, illuminating the square in a blinding flash of white light, followed instantly by a boom that rattled Chloe's teeth. She flinched, instinctively burying her face in Tucker's chest. "Come on!" He grabbed her hand. "Inside!" He dragged her through the flap of the pavilion. Inside, it was dry, though the sound of the rain hammering against the canvas roof was deafening. It was dimmer in here, the gray light filtering through the white fabric, creating a strange, enclosed world. They stood there for a moment, panting, dripping water onto the grass floor. The adrenaline was coursing through Chloe's veins, making her fingertips tingle. She looked up at Tucker. He was a mess. His hat was gone, lost somewhere in the storm. His sandy hair was dark with water, falling into his eyes. His shirt was soaked through, clinging to his chest and shoulders, outlining the hard planes of his body. Water dripped from his nose and chin. He looked wild and dangerous and absolutely breathtaking. Tucker wiped the water from his eyes and looked back at her. His gaze dropped to her shivering form, then back up to her face. The intensity in his eyes stopped her breath. It wasn't the buddy look. It wasn't the protector look. It was something raw and hungry. "You're shaking," he said. His voice was rough, barely audible over the rain. "It's the adrenaline," she stammered. Her teeth were actually chattering, or the hypothermia, one of the two. He took a step closer. The air between them, already charged by the storm, seemed to spark. "You're crazy," he murmured, shaking his head slightly. "Fighting a storm for a tent." "It's my job," she whispered. "You're amazing." The words hung in the humid air. Chloe's heart hammered against her ribs, harder than it had during the lightning strike. Tucker reached out. His hands were cold from the rain, but when he cupped her face, they burned like fire. He ran his thumbs over her wet cheekbones, wiping away streaks of mud and rain. "Chloe," he breathed. He didn't give her time to think. He didn't give her time to make a joke to deflect the tension. He pulled her close, his arm wrapping around her waist to eliminate the space between them, and brought his mouth down on hers. It wasn't a tentative, testing the waters kiss. It was an explosion. It was 12 years of missed opportunities and 3 days of simmering tension colliding in a single moment. Tucker kissed her with a desperation that shook her to her core. His lips were firm, demanding, and incredibly hot against the cold rain on her skin. Chloe made a small sound in her throat and melted into him. Her hands found their way to his wet shirt, clutching the fabric, pulling him closer. She rose on her tiptoes, meeting his intensity, giving back everything she had been holding in. The smell of rain, ozone, and Tucker filled her senses. He tasted like the storm, wild and electric. His hand tangled in her wet hair, tilting her head back to deepen the kiss. For a moment, the world outside ceased to exist. There was no fair, no divorce, no broken car. There was just the heat of his body and the way his mouth moved against hers. It was the kind of kiss that rewrote history. The kind that made every other kiss she'd ever had feel like a rehearsal. Across the street, the windshield wipers of the silver Mercedes slapped back and forth with a rhythmic thwack-thwack. Brad sat in the driver's seat, the engine idling silently. The climate control was set to a perfect 70 degrees, shielding him from the humidity, but the heat rising in his chest had nothing to do with the weather. He gripped the leather steering wheel so tightly the leather creaked. Through the rain-streaked glass, he had a clear line of sight through the open flap of the large white tent. The interior was backlit by the dim daylight, creating a perfect silhouette show. He saw them. He saw the way the tall rancher lout grabbed his wife. He saw the way he pulled her body against his. He saw the way Chloe, who had flinched away from Brad's touch just yesterday, threw her arms around the cowboy's neck and kissed him back. Brad watched the embrace, his jaw working. A vein throbbed in his temple. This wasn't just a woman fleeing a bad marriage. This wasn't a confused girl needing space. This was a rebellion. Chloe was his. She was his project. He had molded her, fixed her, told her who she was. And now she was letting some dirt farming local put his hands all over her. "You think you can just replace me?" Brad whispered to the empty car. "With him?" A dark, cold rage settled in his stomach, heavier than the anger he had felt in the square. That had been embarrassment. This was war. He watched Tucker break the kiss, resting his forehead against Chloe's. He saw Chloe smile, a soft, dazed smile that Brad hadn't seen in years. Brad shifted the Mercedes into drive. He didn't speed off. He didn't honk. He slowly pulled away from the curb, his eyes fixed on the rearview mirror until the white tent disappeared into the gray curtain of rain. "Enjoy it while it lasts, darling," he sneered, "because I'm about to burn this whole little pastoral fantasy to the ground." He reached for his phone on the passenger seat. He had a call to make, a lawyer, and maybe a private investigator. He needed dirt. Everyone had dirt, even St. Tucker of the cow pasture. And if he couldn't find dirt, well, Brad was excellent at manufacturing it. The morning sun hit the wet grass of the Double D Ranch with a brilliance that felt like an apology for the night before. The storm had washed the world clean, leaving the air smelling of damp earth and pine needles. Chloe woke up in the guest cabin, tangled in a quilt that smelled like detergent and faintly Tucker. She stretched, her muscles aching from the tent wrestling match, and for a solid 10 seconds she forgot everything. She was just warm and rested. Then memory crashed in. The rain. The tent. The way Tucker's shirt had clung to his chest. The kiss. Oh, sweet mercy. The kiss. She buried her face in the pillow and groaned, kicking her legs like a teenager. It hadn't been a dream. She, Chloe Paxton, the woman currently navigating the Titanic of divorces, had made out with Tucker Donovan in a thunderstorm. And she had liked it. A lot. A knock on the cabin door made her jump. "Chloe, you awake?" It was him. His voice was rougher in the morning, a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate through the wood of the door. I'm decent. Come in." She frantically smoothed her hair, which she knew resembled a bird's nest that had been through a spin cycle. The door opened, and Tucker stepped in. He was carrying 2 mugs of coffee. He was wearing fresh jeans and a plain white t-shirt that fit him in a way that should be illegal in 48 states. He stopped just inside the door, his eyes finding hers. The air in the room instantly grew thin. "Morning," he said, walking over to the island. He set a mug down for her. "Black. 2 sugars. That's how you drank it in high school, right?" Chloe stared at him. "You remember how I took my coffee from 12 years ago? I remember a lot of things," he said quietly. He leaned against the counter, crossing his arms over his chest. He looked steady, solid. There was no awkwardness in his posture, just a quiet intensity. "About last night," Chloe started, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "Tucker, I don't want you to think I'm just rebounding, or that I'm messy. Well, I am messy, clearly, but... Chloe, I just mean, my life is a dumpster fire right now, and you're this incredibly stable, kind, handsome tree of a man, and I don't want to drag you into my... Chloe." He stepped forward, closing the distance between them in 2 strides. He put a hand on her shoulder, effectively silencing her babbling. "I didn't kiss you because I felt sorry for you," he said, looking down at her with those piercing hazel eyes. "And I didn't kiss you because of the storm." "You didn't?" "No." His thumb brushed her collarbone, sending a shiver down her spine. "I kissed you because I've wanted to do it since the 10th grade. And because you looked at me like you wanted me to." Chloe's breath hitched. "I did want you to." Good. He leaned in, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to her forehead. Then stop overthinking it. Drink your coffee, we have a fare to save. The town square looked like a swamp that had swallowed a carnival. Puddles the size of small lakes dotted the grass. Bunting hung limp and sodden. But the pavilion of pastries, miraculously, was standing tall and proud, the only dry patch of land in the county. We did that, Chloe said, pointing at the tent with pride as they walked onto the muddy field. That is the tent that love built, or, well, adrenaline built. Structural integrity is sexy, Tucker agreed, hauling a toolbox out of his truck bed. The rest of the morning was a blur of activity. The sun was hot, turning the humidity up to a level that felt like walking through soup, but spirits were high. The vendors were grateful the tent hadn't collapsed, and Mayor Higgins was so relieved he actually bought Chloe a lemonade without complaining about the price. Tucker was everywhere. He was fixing a broken table leg for the jam vendor. He was lifting heavy crates for the quilting circle. He was charming the socks off Mrs. Gable. Every time he caught Chloe's eye across the square, he'd give her a small, private wink that made her stomach do flip-flops. For the first time in months, Chloe felt light. She felt like maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind her. She had a job, she had a place to stay. She had whatever this was with Tucker. Around 2 p.m., a beige sedan pulled up to the curb of the town square. It wasn't Brad's Mercedes. It was a nondescript fleet model car that screamed, official business. A man in a wrinkled gray suit stepped out. He checked a clipboard, scanned the square, and started walking straight toward the information booth where Chloe was organizing raffle tickets. Tucker, who was repairing a sign nearby, noticed the man immediately. He straightened up, hammer in hand, his eyes narrowing. The man stopped in front of the booth. Chloe Paxton? Yes? Chloe looked up, smiling professionally. Can I help you? Raffle tickets are 2 for $5. I'm not here for the raffle, ma'am. The man reached into his jacket pockets and pulled out a thick envelope. I'm a process server. You've been served. He dropped the envelope onto the stack of tickets. Chloe stared at it. The return address was a prestigious, terrifyingly expensive law firm in the city. Sterling and Associates. Brad's family firm. Her hands started to tremble. Tucker was there in a second. He didn't intervene physically, but he stood right next to her, a silent wall of support. What is this? Chloe whispered, her voice barely audible. Motion to contest and petition for injunctive relief, the server said, sounding bored. Have a nice day. He turned and walked away, dodging a puddle. Chloe's fingers shook so badly she could barely open the clasp. She slid the papers out. The legal jargon was dense, but the bold headings were clear enough. Emergency motion to freeze assets. Petition to invalidate separation date. Motion to compel mental health evaluation. What does it say? Tucker asked, his voice low and tight. Chloe felt the blood drain from her face. She read the summary paragraph. He's contesting the divorce, she said, her voice sounding hollow. He's claiming that I wasn't in my right mind when I signed the initial papers. He's filing for a full forensic audit of our finances. She flipped the page. He's frozen everything, Tucker. Not just the joint account. He got a judge to freeze my personal savings, claiming they are disputed marital assets until the audit is complete. That could take months, years. She looked up at Tucker, her eyes wide with panic. And the divorce decree, it stalled. He's petitioning to keep us legally married until the mental health evaluation is completed by a doctor of his choosing. He can't do that, Tucker growled. You're sane. You left him. He has money. He has lawyers who play golf with judges. Chloe felt the walls closing in again, tighter than before. The sunlight seemed to dim. He's cutting off my air supply. I have $0. I can't pay a lawyer to fight this. I can't even pay for gas. She looked down at the bottom of the page. There was a sticky note attached, written in Brad's elegant, sharp handwriting. Being an adult is hard, isn't it, darling? Don't worry about the bills. I'll take care of everything once you come home and we get you the treatment you clearly need. I'll be waiting. He's not letting me go, Chloe whispered, the paper crinkling in her grip. He's going to keep me married to him until I crawl back. Tucker took the paper from her hand. He read the note. His face didn't change, but his knuckles turned white as he gripped the page. He thinks he can starve you out, Tucker said. The dangerous edge was back in his voice, darker than the storm. He can, Chloe said, tears spilling over. I have nothing, Tucker. I am completely trapped. Tucker looked at the legal document, then at the terrified woman standing in the mud. He crumpled the sticky note in his fist. You're not trapped, he said. You're just at war. He looked toward the Oakhaven Inn, visible down the street where the silver Mercedes was parked. And he just made a big mistake, Tucker said. He thinks you're alone. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and oranges, signaling the official start of opening night. The Oakhaven Summer Fair transformed as the twilight took hold. Strings of Edison bulbs flickered to life, casting a warm, golden glow over the drying grass. The smell of wet earth was replaced by the aggressive scent of kettle corn, funnel cakes, and diesel fumes from the generator powering the tilt-a-whirl. Under normal circumstances, Chloe would have been basking in the glory of her logistical triumph. The pavilion was standing. The pie judges were seated. The band was tuning up without visible bloodshed. But Chloe felt like she was walking through a minefield wearing clown shoes. "Just keep moving," Tucker murmured in her ear. He was shadowing her so closely, he was practically her own personal eclipse. He had swapped his work shirt for a clean, crisp button-down, though he still wore the boots and the serious expression of a Secret Service agent. "Don't look at the inn." "I can feel him, Tucker," Chloe whispered, clutching her clipboard like a shield. "He's like a disruption in the force, a very expensive cologne-wearing disruption. Ignore him." "You're working. You're busy. You're the boss." "I'm the boss," she repeated, trying to manifest confidence. "I am the queen of the county fair." She managed to smile at Mrs. Gable, who was judging the preserves table with the severity of a Supreme Court justice. She successfully directed the marching band away from the petting zoo before the tubas spooked the llamas. For an hour, it almost worked. She almost forgot about the legal nuke that had been dropped in her lap that afternoon. Then, the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't a sudden silence. It was a ripple. Heads turned. Whispers started at the south gate and flowed toward the center square like a wave. Chloe froze. She knew that ripple. She had lived in that ripple for 5 years. Brad walked onto the fairgrounds. He wasn't wearing the sharp suit from earlier. He had changed into dark jeans and a cashmere sweater, an outfit carefully curated to say, "I'm approachable, yet clearly better than you." He walked with a slight slump to his shoulders, a subtle affectation of weariness and sorrow. He wasn't alone. He was walking with Reverend Thomas, the town's beloved elderly pastor. Brad was nodding solemnly at something the Reverend was saying, looking for all the world like a man seeking spiritual counsel in a time of great trial. "Unbelievable," Tucker growled low in his throat. "He's working the preacher." "He's good," Chloe said, her stomach twisting into a cold knot. "He's so good." They watched as Brad stopped at the ticket booth. He pulled out a wallet and handed a thick stack of bills to the stunned volunteer. He gestured to a group of kids standing nearby, the ones from the trailer park down by the creek, and pointed to the rides. "Did he just?" "He just bought ride wristbands for the underprivileged kids," Tucker said, his jaw tightening. "He's buying the town." "He doesn't even like children," Chloe hissed. "He calls them sticky noise machines." Brad moved through the crowd, shaking hands. He didn't look arrogant. He looked humble. He looked sad. When people looked at him, then looked at Chloe, their expressions weren't friendly anymore. They looked confused. Judgmental. Why is she with the rancher while her nice, generous husband is looking so heartbroken? "I need to check the sound system," Chloe said abruptly, turning away. "I can't watch this." "Chloe, wait." Tucker started, but she was already speed-walking toward the bandstand. She needed noise. She needed distraction. She climbed the steps to the stage, fiddling with the microphone stand, trying to focus on the wires, on the amps, on anything but the man methodically dismantling her reputation 10 yards away. "Checking. 1, 2, she said into the mic. Her voice boomed across the square, startling a few pigeons. "You sound tense, darling." The voice didn't come through the speakers. It came from right beside the stage. Chloe whipped around. Brad was standing at the bottom of the stairs looking up at her. He was alone for the moment, the crowd giving him a respectful radius. "Go away, Brad," she said, her voice trembling. She forgot she was holding the mic. The feedback squealed. "Please, lower your voice," Brad said softly, his face a mask of concern. "People are staring. You know how you get when you're manic." "I am not manic," she snapped, stepping away from the mic, but her voice was still loud in the quiet lull between songs. "I am working. Leave me alone." Brad sighed and walked up the first 2 steps. He held out a hand, palm up, a gesture of peace. Or a trap. "I just want you to come down, Chloe. You look exhausted. Your mother told me you haven't been sleeping. She's worried sick. I'm worried sick." "My mother?" Chloe felt the trap snap shut. "You talked to my mother?" "I had tea with her this afternoon. Lovely woman. She agrees that this episode has gone on long enough. She wants you to come back to the inn with me. We can call Dr. Arrington. Get your prescription adjusted." "I don't have a prescription." Chloe's voice rose, shrill and panicked. "I don't have an episode. I left you because you're cruel." Heads were turning now. The crowd near the stage had stopped talking. They saw a frantic, disheveled woman screaming at a calm, soft-spoken man who was just trying to help. "Chloe, please," Brad whispered, stepping closer, invading her space. "You're making a scene. Just like at the charity gala, remember? You drank too much, you screamed at the waiter. It's happening again." "I never screamed at a waiter," Chloe shouted, backing up until she hit the drum kit. "You made that up, you gaslight everyone." "Gaslight?" Brad chuckled sadly, shaking his head. "One of your buzzwords. Look at yourself, Chloe. You're shaking. You're paranoid. You're living in a shed with a man you barely know. Does that sound like the behavior of a stable woman?" He took another step. His eyes were cold, dead sharks in a sea of cashmere, but his voice was pure honey. "Come here. Let me take care of you. You're not well." Something inside Chloe snapped. It was the condescension. It was the lie about her mother. It was the way he looked at her like she was a broken toy he needed to put back on the shelf. "I am not crazy." She screamed it. It tore from her throat, raw and desperate. She grabbed the nearest object, a tambourine resting on an amp, and hurled it. She didn't aim at him, she just threw it. But her aim was wild. The tambourine sailed past Brad's head and crashed into the stack of cymbals on the drum kit. Crash, clang, clatter. The sound was explosive. The drum set wobbled and a cymbal stand toppled over, falling off the stage and landing in the grass with a deafening metallic thud right at the feet of Mayor Higgins. The silence that followed was absolute. The band stopped tuning. The pie eaters stopped eating. The entire town of Oakhaven turned to stare at the stage. They saw Chloe, chest heaving, hair wild, standing amidst the wreckage of the drum kit. They saw Brad, flinching theatrically, holding a hand to his chest as if he'd been physically struck, looking at his wife with eyes full of tragic pity. "Oh, Chloe," Brad said, loud enough for the front row to hear. "Oh, honey, what have you done?" Chloe looked around the sea of faces. She saw Mrs. Gable covering her mouth. She saw the sheriff frowning. She saw the judgment. She's unstable. He was right. Look at her. Tears of frustration and rage blurred her vision. He had done it. He had pushed the button, waited for the explosion, and then stepped back to let the shrapnel hit her. She stammered, pointing a shaking finger at Brad. He's lying to all of you." But she could hear how she sounded. She sounded hysterical. Brad turned to the crowd, spreading his hands helplessly. "I am so sorry, everyone. My wife she's been under a great deal of stress. We're dealing with some health issues. Please, forgive the disruption." He turned back to her, reaching for her arm. "Come on, Chloe, let's go." "Don't touch her." Tucker vaulted onto the stage. He didn't use the stairs. He jumped from the grass, clearing the edge of the platform in one fluid motion, landing between Chloe and Brad. He didn't look at the crowd. He didn't look at the mayor. He looked at Brad. "You back off," Tucker said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a vibration that rattled the floorboards. "Right now." "I'm collecting my wife, Mr. Donovan," Brad said, his voice tight. "Before she hurts herself or someone else. You saw what just happened. She's violent." "I saw you provoke her," Tucker snarled. "I saw you corner her." "I saw a woman throw a tantrum," someone in the crowd muttered. Tucker's head snapped toward the audience, his glare silencing the heckler instantly. He turned back to Chloe. She was trembling so hard she could barely stand. She looked small, defeated, and utterly broken. "Chloe?" Tucker asked gently, ignoring Brad. "You want to go with him?" "No," she whispered. "Never." "Then you're not going." Tucker wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her into his side. He looked at Brad. "She stays. You go, or I throw you off the stage. And I won't miss." Brad looked at Tucker's fists, then at the crowd. He realized that while he had won the sympathy vote, physically challenging the largest rancher in the county was a losing proposition. He adjusted his cuffs. He looked at Chloe with an expression of profound disappointment. "I can't force you, Chloe," Brad said softly. "But the judge will hear about this. The whole town saw it. You just proved my case for me." He turned to the crowd, gave a small, apologetic bow, and walked away. The crowd parted for him like the Red Sea. People patted him on the back. Mrs. Higgins touched his arm sympathetically. Chloe watched him go. She felt Tucker's solid warmth against her, but it couldn't stop the cold spreading through her veins. "I messed up," she whispered, burying her face in Tucker's shirt. "I played right into it. Everyone thinks I'm crazy." "Let's get out of here," Tucker said, steering her toward the back of the stage, away from the staring eyes. "Just keep walking." As they descended the stairs into the shadows behind the bandstand, the murmurs of the town followed them. The fair went on. The music started up, the rides spun. But the damage was done. Brad had set the stage, and Chloe had performed her part perfectly. The morning after the tambourine incident, as Chloe had grimly started calling it, the mood at the Double D Ranch was somber. The humiliation of the night before hung over the breakfast table like a thick fog. Chloe picked at her toast, unable to meet Tucker's eyes. She felt radioactive, like her mere presence was contaminating his peaceful life. Tucker was at the kitchen island, his laptop open, frowning at the screen. He had been silent for 10 minutes, just clicking and staring. "I should go," Chloe said, breaking the silence. Her voice was raspy. "I'll hitchhike. I'll live in a hollowed-out tree." "I don't care. I can't stay here, Tucker." "Sit down, Chloe," Tucker rumbled, not looking up. "No, seriously. Brad won. The whole town thinks I'm a lunatic. And now he's going to come for you." He practically promised it. "He already has," Tucker said flatly. Chloe froze. "What?" Tucker turned the laptop around. On the screen was his business banking portal. Across the top, a red banner flashed. "Account frozen. Pending legal inquiry." "He filed a motion this morning," Tucker said, his voice terrifyingly calm, "alleging that I am conspiring to conceal marital assets and aiding in the alienation of affection. He got a judge to put a temporary freeze on the ranch's operating accounts. I can't pay my hands. I can't buy feed." Chloe dropped her face into her hands, a sob tearing from her throat. "I knew it. I destroyed your life. I have to surrender, Tucker. If I go back to him, he'll drop it. He'll leave you alone." "You are not going back to him." Tucker snapped the laptop shut with a decisive click. "And I am not losing my ranch to a guy who wears loafers without socks." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He didn't look worried, he looked focused. "Like a quarterback in the fourth quarter with 2 minutes on the clock?" "You think Brad is the only one with friends?" Tucker asked, scrolling through his contacts. "He has high-powered lawyers, Tucker. You have cows." "I have friends who didn't stay in Oakhaven," Tucker corrected. "Friends who went to the city. Friends who owe me." He pressed a name on the screen and put the phone on speaker, tossing it onto the table between them. It rang twice. "Donovan!" A crisp, energetic voice answered. "To what do I owe the pleasure? Did a tractor fall on you? Do you need bail?" "Hey, Ben," Tucker said, leaning back in his chair. "You still running that firm with Jerry, Goldman and Wise? The best sharks in the deeper end of the pool. Why? Finally ready to sue the weather for ruining your hay?" "I need you to look into Sterling and Associates," Tucker said. The line went silent for a beat, then a low whistle. "The Sterling family? Bradley Sterling? That's big game, Tuck. They're heavy hitters, old money, very aggressive. He's currently trying to bury me," Tucker said. "And he's holding an old friend of ours hostage legally. Chloe Paxton." "Chloe?" Ben's voice softened. "The drama girl. I remember her. She was funny. What's happening?" "Divorce." "Ugly. He's frozen her assets, claims she's insane, and now he's frozen my accounts because I'm letting her stay in my guest cabin." "That's a classic Sterling move," Ben said, his tone shifting from friendly to professional. "Scorched earth. They bleed the opposition dry so they can't afford a defense. But what?" Chloe asked, leaning toward the phone. "Who's that? Chloe?" "Hi, Ben," she whispered. "Long time." "Hi, Chloe." "Look, the thing about the Sterlings is that they're arrogant," Ben explained. "Jerry and I have been hearing rumors for years. They win cases they shouldn't win. Their corporate clients have a magical way of making tax liabilities disappear. We've always suspected they're running a dirty shop, cooking books, offshore shuffling, maybe even laundering. But nobody can prove it because nobody gets close enough." Tucker looked at Chloe. "If we can prove he's dirty," Tucker said to the phone, "does the divorce hold up?" "If we can prove he's committing financial fraud," Ben laughed darkly, "the divorce will be the least of his problems. The feds will seize his assets, not yours, and any judge will grant you an immediate protective order and separation. But we need a thread to pull, Tuck. We need something concrete. A transaction, a name, a file, anything." The room fell silent. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. Chloe stared at the wood grain of the table. Her mind was racing, spinning back through 5 years of marriage. 5 years of dinner she wasn't allowed to speak at. 5 years of office parties where she was just a decoration. Financial fraud. Cooking the books. Dirty shop. A memory flickered. It was 2 years ago, late at night. Brad had called her to his home office, a room she was usually forbidden to enter. He was drunk. He had been celebrating a massive win for a client who imported exotic textiles. She remembered the smell of scotch. She remembered him laughing, boasting about how clever he was. "They think they can trace it, Chloe," he had slurred, waving a thick file folder. "They look at the digital records, but they never look at the ghosts." He had opened the wall safe behind the painting of the ship. She had watched him put the file inside. But he hadn't just put it in the stack. He had lifted the false bottom of the safe, a mechanism she hadn't known existed, and pulled out a small, black external hard drive. He had patted it like a pet. "The red ledger," he had whispered, winking at her. "My insurance policy. Every favor, every bribe, every buried body. As long as I have this, I am untouchable." The next morning, he had forgotten he told her. Or maybe he just assumed she was too stupid to understand what it meant. He had never mentioned it again. Chloe's breath hitched. Her eyes snapped open, wide and focused. "The ghost?" she whispered. "What?" Tucker asked. "Ben," Chloe said, her voice gaining strength. "Does the term the red ledger mean anything to you?" Silence on the line. Then Ben's voice came back, sharp and hungry. "That's an urban legend in the legal world. People say Sterling keeps a black book of his illegal dealings, but everyone assumes it's a myth." "It's not a myth," Chloe said. She looked at Tucker, a fierce determination replacing her fear. "I saw it. It's a black hard drive. He calls it his insurance policy." "Do you know where it is?" Ben asked. "It's in his home office in the city," Chloe said. "In the wall safe, under the false bottom." "Chloe," Ben said, his voice deadly serious. "If that drive exists, and if it has what I think it has, it's the smoking gun. It ends him. But we can't get a warrant on a hunch. It would disappear before the police got through the front door." Tucker looked at Chloe. A silent understanding passed between them. The legal system couldn't get it. The police couldn't get it. But a wife with a key? And a rancher who knew how to bypass a security fence? "Thanks, Ben," Tucker said. "Start drawing up the paperwork to contest the freeze on my accounts." "Stall him." "What are you guys going to do?" Ben asked warily. "We're going to take a little road trip," Tucker said. He hung up the phone. The kitchen was quiet again, but the heavy, suffocating feeling was gone. In its place was the buzzing energy of a plan. "You know the alarm codes?" Tucker asked. "I know the alarm codes," Chloe confirmed. "I know the safe combination. I know the staff schedule. The housekeeper comes on Tuesdays and Fridays. Today is Wednesday. The house will be empty." "He's here in Oakhaven," Tucker mused, "staying at the inn. He thinks you're cornered here. He won't be expecting you to go back to the lion's den." "It's 3 hours to the city," Chloe said. "If we leave now, we can be there and back before he realizes I'm not weeping in my pillow." Tucker stood up. He walked over to the key rack and grabbed the keys to a different vehicle, not the dusty farm truck, but a sleek, dark SUV that usually stayed in the garage. "Go get changed," he said. "Wear something dark, and comfortable shoes this time." Chloe stood up. Her heart was pounding, but for the first time in forever, it wasn't from fear. It was from the thrill of the fight. "Tucker," she said, "if we get caught, that's burglary. That's prison." Tucker turned at the door, flashing a grin that was sharp, reckless, and devastatingly attractive. "Only if we get caught," he said. "Let's go steal your life back." The city skyline rose from the horizon like a row of jagged teeth, glittering with a cold, artificial light that was a stark contrast to the soft stars over Oakhaven. Chloe sat in the passenger seat of Tucker's black SUV, her hands twisting in her lap. She was wearing black jeans, a black hoodie, and sneakers, her cat burglar couture, as she'd nervously joked at the gas station 40 miles back. Tucker drove with one hand on the wheel, his eyes scanning the highway. He was calm, terrifyingly so. He treated this heist not like a crime, but like a necessary ranch operation. Identify the problem, Brad, locate the solution, the drive, and execute. "You okay?" he asked, glancing at her as they passed the exit for the airport. "I feel like I'm going to throw up," Chloe admitted. "That house? It's not a home, Tucker. It's a museum where I was the least valuable exhibit. Going back there feels like walking into a cage I just escaped." Tucker reached over and took her hand. His grip was warm and grounding. "You're not walking into a cage. You're walking into a bank vault. We make the withdrawal, we leave, and you never look back." They exited the highway and wound through the affluent suburbs. The houses grew larger, the gates taller, the lawns more manicured. It was a world of silence and surveillance. Tucker killed the headlights as they turned onto Elm Streets. Brad's house, their house, sat at the end of a cul-de-sac. It was a modern monstrosity of glass and steel, dark and imposing against the night sky. "Park down the street," Chloe whispered. The neighbors have cameras. If they see a strange truck, they'll post about it on next door before we even get out. Tucker pulled to the curb 3 houses down, hidden in the shadow of a large oak tree. He cut the engine. Ready? No, Chloe breathed. Let's do it. They moved quickly through the shadows, sticking to the landscaping. Chloe's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She knew the blind spots of the security cameras. She had memorized them not to sneak in, but to find places to cry where Brad couldn't see her. They reached the side door, the one leading to the mudroom. Here goes nothing, she whispered. Her fingers hovered over the keypad. Please don't have changed it. Please be arrogant enough to think I'm too scared to come back. She punched in the code, 1024, the date of his biggest merger. The light on the pad turned green. The lock clicked open. Chloe let out a shuddering breath. We're in! The air inside was stale, smelling of lemon polish and expensive leather. It was freezing. Brad kept the thermostat at a crisp 68 degrees at all times. Tucker stepped in behind her, closing the door softly. He looked around the pristine, sterile kitchen. It's quiet. It's dead, Chloe corrected. Come on, office is this way. They moved through the house like ghosts. Chloe refused to look at the living room, refused to look at the spot on the rug where he had once thrown a wine glass, because she bought the wrong vintage. She focused on the hallway. The office double doors were closed. She pushed them open. The room smelled of scotch and cedar. It was exactly as she remembered. The massive mahogany desk, the leather chairs, the oil painting of the ship on the stormy sea. Behind the ship? Chloe whispered. Tucker moved to the painting. He lifted it carefully from the wall, setting it on the floor. Behind it sat a sleek digital wall safe. Okay, Chloe said, stepping up to it. The combination! She closed her eyes, visualizing the numbers. Brad used codes that made him feel powerful. 0-0-0-1. Number 1. Always number 1. Beep, 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 beep. Click. The heavy steel door swung open. Tucker let out a low whistle. God, he is arrogant. Chloe reached inside. There were stacks of cash, a few watches, and a velvet bag of diamonds. She ignored them all. She felt around the felt lining of the bottom shelf. There's a latch, she murmured. Right here. She pressed a hidden indentation. A small panel popped up with a soft mechanical hiss. Sitting in the hidden compartment, resting on a bed of foam, was a slim, matte black hard drive. The red ledger? Tucker said, reaching over her shoulder to pluck it out. He held it up to the moonlight filtering through the window. Doesn't look like much. It's a nuclear bomb, Chloe said, her voice trembling with relief. Let's go. We got it. Tucker pocketed the drive. He reached for the painting to hang it back up. Crunch. Gravel crunching outside. Both of them froze. Through the sheer curtains of the office window, twin beams of light swept across the front lawn. A car had pulled into the driveway. Is it him? Tucker asked, his voice a barely audible growl. He moved to the window, peering through the crack in the drapes. It can't be. He's in Oakhaven. He's at the inn. It's a patrol car, Tucker hissed. Sterling Private Security. The logo is on the door. They do vacation checks, Chloe gasped, panic seizing her throat. If the alarm is disarmed but the house is supposed to be empty, they come to check the perimeter. They might come inside. A spotlight mounted on the car swept over the front of the house. They'll see the mudroom doors unlocked. Chloe whispered. Tucker, we're trapped. No, Tucker said, grabbing her arm. The closet. Now. He dragged her toward the large walk-in closet where Brad kept his suits. They slipped inside, pulling the door shut until it clicked. It was pitch black. The smell of Brad's cologne, sandalwood, and musk was overpowering in the confined space. It made Chloe nauseous. Breathe, Tucker whispered against her ear. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her back against his chest. He was a solid wall of heat in the cold house. They heard the front door open. Hello, Mr. Sterling? A deep voice echoed from the foyer, heavy footsteps on the hardwood. Click-clack, click-clack. Dispatch, this is Unit 4. Front door secured, but the side entry was unlocked. Checking the premises. The footsteps moved closer. Into the living room. Then down the hall. Chloe buried her face in Tucker's shirt to stifle the sound of her own breathing. Her heart was beating so hard, she was sure the guard could hear it. The office doors creaked. A beam of light sliced through the gap under the closet door. It swept back and forth. Clear in the office, the guard's voice said, sounding bored. Looks like the cleaning crew might have forgot to lock the side door. Nothing disturbed. The light lingered on the closet door. Chloe stopped breathing. Tucker's arms tightened around her, his hand resting protectively over her heart. The guard took a step toward the closet. Buzz. The guard's radio crackled. Unit 4, we have a silent alarm at the plot on 4th Street. Priority response. Copy that, dispatch. En route. Securing the residence now. The footsteps retreated. The front door slammed shut. The sound of the engine revving, then fading away. Silence returned to the house. Chloe sagged against Tucker, her legs turning to jelly. I think I died. I think I'm a ghost now. You're alive, Tucker whispered, kissing the top of her head. And we're leaving. Now. They slipped out of the closet, through the office, and back to the mudroom. Tucker checked the window. Coast was clear. They sprinted across the lawn, sticking to the shadows, until they reached the SUV. They scrambled inside, Tucker locking the doors instantly. He didn't start the engine immediately. He looked at her. You okay? Chloe reached into his pocket and pulled out the black drive. She held it tight, feeling the cool metal bite into her palm. Drive, she said. Drive fast. An hour later, they were sitting in a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of the city. The neon sign buzzed overhead. Tucker had his laptop open on the Formica table, connected to the diner's spotty Wi-Fi. The black drive was plugged in. It's encrypted, Tucker said, typing furiously, but Ben gave me a decryption key program his firm uses for less than official discoveries. A progress bar on the screen crawled forward. Decrypting. 98%. 99%. Complete. Folders popped up, hundreds of them, labeled with names of politicians, judges, and shell companies. Tucker clicked on a folder named Tax Shelter. Cayman, 2023. He opened a spreadsheet. His eyes widened. Holy cow. What? Chloe asked, leaning over his shoulder. Chloe, he's not just hiding his own money, he's laundering money for half the cartel affiliates in the tri-state area. Look at these transfers. He clicked another file, Judge H. Payment schedule. That's the judge who froze your accounts, Tucker said, pointing at the screen. He's on the payroll. Chloe stared at the glowing screen. It wasn't just dirt. It was a graveyard. It was proof that Brad's entire empire was built on a foundation of rot. It's over, she whispered. He's done. Tucker pulled up an email client. He attached the key files, the ledger, the bribes, the laundering schemes. He typed Ben's address in the recipient field. Subject, the red ledger. Checkmate. You ready? Tucker asked, his finger hovering over the enter key. Chloe took a deep breath. She looked at the screen, then at the man sitting next to her, the man who had driven into the night, broken into a fortress, and held her while she was terrified, all without asking for a thing in return. Send it, she said. Burn it all down. Tucker hit send. The progress bar whooshed across the screen. Message sent. Tucker closed the laptop. He looked at Chloe, a fierce, triumphant grin breaking across his face. Ben is going to wake up to the best Christmas present of his life, Tucker said. By the time the sun comes up, he'll have filed this with the FBI, the IRS, and the State Bar Association. And Brad? Brad is going to wake up thinking he's the king of the world, Tucker said, reaching for his coffee. He has no idea the guillotine just dropped. Chloe leaned back in the booth. The diner was loud, smelling of grease and old coffee, but it felt like the most beautiful place on earth. Let's go home, Tucker, she said softly. I want to be in Oakhaven when the storm hits. Let's go home, he agreed. They walked out to the truck, the red ledger safely in Tucker's pocket, leaving the city lights behind them. The nightmare was over. The reckoning was just beginning. The sun was just cresting the eastern ridge when the black SUV crunched up the gravel drive of the Double D Ranch. The sky was a bruised purple, bleeding into a hopeful, pale gold. Chloe sat in the passenger seat, the adrenaline of the night finally crashing into a wall of exhaustion. She felt brittle, like spun sugar, but underneath the fatigue was a core of steel she hadn't known existed 24 hours ago. Tucker parked the truck in front of the cabin. He didn't get out immediately. He turned off the engine and looked at her. Ben just texted, he said, his voice gravelly with lack of sleep. The FBI field office in the city has the files. They're moving. They're contacting the local field agents. It's real, Chloe whispered. It's actually happening. It's real. They climbed out of the truck. The morning air was crisp, smelling of damp grass and the cows lowing in the lower pasture. It was the smell of peace. Chloe walked up the porch steps, Tank the dog thumping his tail sleepily from his mat. She reached for the door handle. You took something of mine. The voice came from the shadows of the porch swing. Chloe froze. Her heart stopped, then hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Brad stepped out of the gloom. He looked like a man who had been shattered and glued back together wrong. His cashmere sweater was rumpled. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with red, wild and unblinking. He hadn't shaved, and the shadow on his jaw made him look deranged. "Brad," Chloe breathed. "I went to the office," Brad said, his voice trembling with a terrifying mix of rage and panic. "I got an alert. Silent alarm. I drove back. Imagine my surprise when I found my painting on the floor." He took a step toward her. "Where is it, Chloe? Give it to me." "Now." "Stay back," Tucker growled. He moved instantly, stepping between Chloe and Brad. He didn't posture, he just occupied the space, a wall of muscle and menace. "You're trespassing, Sterling! Get off my land! You have stolen property!" Brad screamed, his composure finally snapping. He looked small and frantic next to Tucker. "That drive contains privileged attorney-client information! You have no idea what you've done! You've ruined me!" "That was the idea," Tucker said calmly. "I will bury you!" Brad lunged, not at Tucker, but trying to reach around him to grab Chloe. "Give it to me, you stupid cow! You useless, ungrateful!" Tucker caught Brad by the front of his sweater. He didn't punch him. He simply shoved him backward with enough force to lift Brad off his feet. Brad stumbled down the porch steps, landing hard in the dirt. He scrambled up, his face purple with humiliation and fury. He reached into his waistband. Chloe saw the glint of metal. "Tucker!" she screamed. Brad pulled a small silver pistol. It shook in his hand. "I'm not leaving without that drive!" Brad yelled, aiming the gun wildly between the two of them. "You think you can win? You think you can leave me? I own you, Chloe! I made you!" Tucker didn't flinch. He put one arm slowly behind him, pushing Chloe toward the door. "Go inside, Chloe." "No," she said. She stepped out from behind him. "Chloe, get back!" Tucker barked, his eyes never leaving the gun. "No." She walked to the railing. She looked down at the man she had feared for 5 years. The man who had controlled her money, her clothes, her thoughts. She looked at him, shivering in the dirt with a gun he barely knew how to hold, and she realized something profound. He wasn't a monster. He was just a small, scared bully who had lost his favorite toy. "You didn't make me, Brad," she said, her voice clear and ringing in the morning air. "You broke me. And then I fixed myself." "Shut up!" Brad shrieked. "Give me the drive!" "I can't," she said. "It's gone. We emailed it. The FBI has it. The IRS has it. Ben Goldman has it." Brad went pale. The gun lowered slightly as the shock hit him. You emailed it?" "Checkmate," Tucker said. The sound of sirens cut through the air. It started as a low wail in the distance, growing louder and louder until it filled the valley. Blue and red lights flashed at the main gate, then sped up the long driveway. Sheriff Grady's cruiser led the pack, followed by 2 black sedans with government plates. Brad spun around, looking at the approaching cavalcade. Panic, pure and primal, took over. He looked at the woods, then at his car, then back at the gun in his hand. "Drop it, son," Tucker said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "Don't turn a life sentence into a death sentence." Brad looked at Tucker. He looked at the woman standing on the porch, looking down at him not with fear, but with pity. His shoulders slumped. The fight drained out of him. He let the gun fall into the dirt. Sheriff Grady's cruiser screeched to a halt. Grady was out behind his door in a second, weapon drawn. "Hands in the air! Now!" Agents and windbreakers emblazoned with FBI swarmed the yard. Brad Sterling, the man who had terrified boardrooms and broken spirits, raised his shaking hands. Chloe watched as they cuffed him. She watched as they read him his rights. She watched as they shoved him into the back of a federal vehicle. As the car pulled away, Brad looked through the window. His eyes met hers one last time. He looked hollow, erased. Chloe let out a long, shuddering breath. Her knees gave way. Tucker caught her before she hit the floorboards. He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. She wrapped her arms around his waist, holding on for dear life. "It's over," he whispered against her ear. "He's gone. He's gone," she repeated, sobbing into his chest. But they weren't sad tears. They were the tears of a fever breaking. 6 months later, the Oakhaven Winter Festival was considerably less chaotic than the summer fair, mostly because frozen ground held steaks better than mud, and hot cocoa was less likely to cause a riot than pie. Chloe Paxton stood by the town gazebo, adjusting the garland on the railing. She was wearing a thick wool coat, a red scarf, and boots that were sensible, warm, and cute. "Coordinator Paxton." Chloe turned. Mayor Higgins was waddling toward her, looking flushed. "The generator for the tree lighting is making a funny noise," he reported breathlessly. "It sounds like a dying goose." I'm on it, Mayor, Chloe said, clipping her walkie-talkie to her belt. I'll get the maintenance crew. You're a miracle worker, Chloe, the mayor beamed. I don't know what we'd do without you. You're definitely running for city council next year, right? Let's get through Christmas first, Mayor, she laughed. She walked toward the maintenance shed, her breath puffing in the chilly air. She passed the post office, where she had just picked up a letter yesterday. A finalized divorce decree. The assets had been seized, the accounts drained by fines and restitution, but she was free. And she had her own name back. She turned the corner and ran smack into a wall of flannel. Whoa there, a deep voice rumbled. Strong hands steadied her. She looked up into a pair of laughing hazel eyes. Tucker was wearing a shearling-lined jacket and his favorite navy cap. He looked rough, wind-blown, and impossibly handsome. You're supposed to be fixing the generator, she scolded, though she was smiling so hard her face hurt. I fixed it 10 minutes ago, he said. It just needed a kick. I've been looking for you. Oh? Reporting a code violation? Reporting a craving, he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small white paper bag. Cinnamon roll. From the bakery. They just came out of the oven. You are an enabler, she said, taking the bag. And I love you for it. Tucker's smile softened. He stepped closer, blocking the wind, creating that familiar safe space that belonged only to them. I love you too, he said. He had said it for the first time 2 months ago, while they were painting the cabin. She had said it back immediately. It hadn't been dramatic. It had been easy. Like breathing. Are you ready for tonight? He asked. The whole town is coming. I'm ready, she said. She looked around the square, at the lights, the people, the life she had built from the wreckage. I'm not scared of crowds anymore. Good, he said. He leaned down and kissed her. It was a slow, sweet kiss, tasting of cold air and promise. Because I was thinking, he murmured against her lips. The cabin is getting a little cramped, and the main house has a lot of empty rooms. Chloe pulled back, searching his eyes. Are you asking me to move into the big house, cowboy? I'm asking you to come home, he said, for good. Chloe looked at him, her protector, her partner, her oak tree. She thought about the city, the lights, the noise, and then she looked at the man who had driven through the night to help her steal her life back. I am home, she said. Tucker grinned, that dazzling, heart-stopping smile. He took her hand, interlacing their fingers. Come on, he said. Let's go light up the tree. They walked toward the center of the square, hand in hand, as the first snowflakes of the season began to fall, settling on the brim of his hat and the shoulders of her coat, covering the scars of the past in a blanket of clean, fresh white.